Hello, YouTubers out there. This is Jerry Saravia at the Movies. I'm going to discuss some comments that were left for some of the videos I have done. The comment was left for a video I did on the book review of Opposable Thumbs. So the comment left was Siskel and Ebert didn't actually know their film history before they became critics, because neither of the universities they attended, which were in Chicago or somewhere in Illinois, intended to have film classes at the time. They only became critics because their predecessors had retired and their film education was under training. To add further, he says, prior to home video and the internet, nobody had comprehensive knowledge of film history like we do now. If you missed a movie when it came out, you'd have to wait until it came to your local revival theater. Film schools outside of major cities in their infancy. Film schools outside of major cities were in their infancy. Okay. Most film historians have to rely on memory of what movies came out and what they watched, because that's the primary reference point they have when writing film books prior to the video market. Well, now this is true. I finished reading the book a little while ago and reread part of it. I think it's a fabulous book. Opposable Thumbs, definitely worth reading. They both didn't have an avid knowledge of film history. I will grant you that. The book does state that, particularly with Ebert. But they had their critical tools already in hand. Particularly when Ebert saw Houdini, the film with biography with Tony Curtis back in 1953, and he said that's not the way it was. That's not what happened with. This is not Houdini's story, and so on. Now, Ebert started seeing a lot of films at repertory theaters at that time. Yes, this is true. And he was in his 20s, really, when he became, to a certain extent, a full-fledged film critic. But I would venture to guess he had seen a lot of movies prior to that. Now, he may not have made a note of the year, the date, the director. Now, Martin Scorsese is the same age, so Martin Scorsese certainly made those things very much a part of his knowledge, to be sure. But they also saw movies on TV. So if certain films were being played, they would be shown on TV. Wouldn't be the full, uncensored version, but because of commercials and time and this and that. But they would run most films from the past on television. As a matter of fact, there's a book which I can't find right now, but it was prior to Leonard Maltin's movie guide. There's another book. Oh, here it is. Stephen H. Schuer, Movies on TV. Now, this book, I think he started in the late 60s or early 70s. So it's, but he made notes of all sorts of films that were playing on TV especially. And that's what this book was all about, were the movies that were playing on TV. So this was going back for quite some time. I can't remember the exact date. I may discuss Stephen H. Schuer at some point. Okay, now another comment was left about a video I did over a decade ago called Jake Lloyd Getting Bullied on Star Wars. And Jake Lloyd, of course, as some of you know, played Anakin Skywalker, later to become, of course, Darth Vader, Star Wars The Phantom Menace, which, of course, is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. And I basically said there was no reason, I don't know, I did the video so long ago, for this kid to be bullied over a movie, but he was, and particularly in school, and then kind of hated being part of Star Wars, but then later on sort of got himself back into it, signing autographs and that sort of thing. So, this commenter said, what, we like child acting now? Well, I think there are some fantastic child actors. Jodie Foster, certainly one of the best ones that we've ever had. Kirsten Dunst, her first film was Interview with a Vampire. Some of these kids are really quite talented. There are many. Robert Blake. Robert Blake was quite talented when he first started. This kid recently, who, depending on what age we're talking about, this 13-year-old Russian kid who appeared in the film Come and See, which I talked about recently. It was released back in 1985. I mean, that's one of the best performances ever given by a child actor. I mean, no doubt in my mind. So, no, we still like child acting. Yes, so do I. I'm not going to pretend I know that there are some talented child actors. This one was in reference to a video I had uploaded quite a while ago. It was a clip from the film Nixon by Oliver Stone, and it says, the title is Nixon being pressed to run for president. So it's a scene which I really like. I think it's a fantastic scene where Nixon, played by Anthony Hopkins, he's inside of this house, and there's a bunch of these Texas businessmen, and many of them in oil and so on and so forth. And Larry Hagman plays a fantastic performance, plays a Texas oil businessman, very rich, very wealthy. He wants Kennedy out. He says they're trying to convince Nixon to please run for president in 1964. So this is before the assassination. So the implication being that, of course, they were all involved in making Kennedy, in taking him out. In fact, one of the characters in that scene says, what if Kennedy doesn't run in 64? And Hopkins, or Nixon, says, not a chance. So it was quite a scene. I've been receiving lots of comments about this clip that I uploaded. Some of them is say, you know, I hate that MF Oliver Stone, but Nixon is a great film, and so on and so forth. One person said, yes, take historical facts out for a ride. Oliver Stone, the original conspiracy theorist. Well, you know what? Yes. I mean, he does do that. For the purposes of dramatization and fictionalization of a film, he wasn't making a documentary. This was Oliver Stone's understanding of Richard Nixon, of what he thought of him. So, yes, there are certain facts that are taken for a ride. There's no question about it. Oliver Stone is the most accessible, or let's just say he's the most famous one of the more famous movie directors we've had. Everything, of course, you know, from Platoon to Born on the 4th of July and so on. And he's always toyed with facts, right? So, again, for the purposes of dramatization, for adapting material for a feature film, he wasn't making a documentary. Now, he is not the only one that's ever been guilty of doing this. Anytime you have a movie biography, and we're talking like even far back, like even just mention about Ebert, and his view on when he was a kid, when he saw Houdini with Tony Curtis in 1953. He said, this is not what happened. This is not the Houdini story. I've read about Houdini. This is not the story, you know. So there's always dramatic license. Now the question is, how much dramatic license do you take? Apparently there's some dramatic license being taken with, if some of you have seen the trailer for Gladiator 2. So everyone is guilty of that. Oliver Stone's just the most famous one for doing it, because his movies still are quite thrilling entertainments for the most part, as is Nixon and certainly JFK. JFK is where that reputation started, being a conspiracy theorist about JFK. Well, he's a movie director that was a conspiracy theorist, for sure. But how many books have been written about JFK and the conspiracy theories? I mean, so many, I wouldn't even know half the authors. I know a couple. I've never actually read one, but that's not the point. He is not the only one. And so it's just kind of silly to say that. Yes, he does take historical facts out for a ride, but I mean, so do a lot of other people. He's hardly the guiltiest one of doing that. And sometimes, again, there are reasons behind it. You're telling a story, but you're fictionalizing the treatment. And that's why I always find it interesting when they always have to put at the beginning a disclaimer for any movie based on actual facts. They say, based on a true story. Or certain facts have been changed. Of course they have. That's what you do when you're dramatizing. You are, you know, it's a matter of how you're dealing with that history. What is it that you're really trying to say? And as that old quote goes, you sometimes have to lie to get to the truth. So, well, I may as well mention, I will say his name, Tim Dougherty, who I've known for, I don't know, over 20 years now, back from the days of moviething.com. So, he said about Come and See, he said, I think my window of opportunity to watch this particular war film, which is a very powerful film, has passed. I just can't handle this kind of heavy, depressing film anymore. I understand the artistic value and importance of it, but it seems like everything is grim enough in the here and now. Not sure I need more of that in entertainment, quote unquote. Yes, I understand that. I mean, sometimes I look for certain films that are a little more upbeat as compared to what's happening, but it's funny. I often find that even when I'm looking for, let's say, light entertainment, or entertainment, quote unquote, I don't expect the war films from certain directors to be that. Come and See, I certainly knew was not going to be an entertainment, like, say, The Great Escape, Guns from Navarone, Force 10 from Navarone. And to be fair, those films are not even anything quite like, say, Saving Private Ryan, or The Big Red One, or Full Metal Jacket, or Platoon, as we mentioned before, or Born on the 4th of July. Or, in that pantheon, Come and See. Come and See is a tough picture. It's very tough. But it is an exceptional film. Now, I understand that. I just, my feeling is this. I don't, there's certain films I've said this before, I'm willing to see just about any kind of film, really. I shy away, though, usually from anything having to do with cannibalism. I don't know what it is. I really can't handle that. I can endure much, but that is just something that I know it's meant to get under your skin. It just gets under my skin, but it's just, I just can't handle that. I don't know what it is. It's a subject I cannot tolerate. So, but when it comes to war films, I mean, speaking of cannibalism, the last film I think I've seen that dealt with that in a very quote-unquote tasteful way was a 1993 film by director Frank Marshall called Alive, which dealt with an actual plane crash with a soccer team from Uruguay, if I'm not mistaken. And in order to survive, they had to eat some of the dead bodies because they were in a frozen tundra. It was just horrible. That film I could deal with because it was, again, tastefully done. And, I do admire Silence of the Lambs very much because, again, it's tastefully done. But there are other films that I know of that deal with cannibalism that don't seem to, I think they get a little more involved in the aspects of cannibalism, and it's just not something I can really handle. But more often than not, I can handle almost anything, really. I endured Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. I endured Harvey Keitel in Bad Lieutenant. They are not upbeat movies at all. They are not entertainments. But not every film has to be entertainment. It doesn't have to rate as entertainment in order to work. And I think that's, for me, that they're just, I've mentioned this before. I didn't get many views on it, but there are 4 different types of films. And usually the fourth, at least in the way that I articulate that in my viewing habits for many years, the 4th kind of film is usually it was a 3rd kind of film where it's meant to be very serious, it's meant to be very focused, laser focused on that. It's not meant to be entertaining, right? Chinatown is a very entertaining movie. It's a tough picture, but it's not Bad Lieutenant. And Come and See, I don't even know what else really to compare that film to. I've heard there are a couple of others that are pretty close to that. But not the other war films I've seen, really, are not nearly on quite that level. So Come and See is just, it's like a never-ending nightmare. And it's a nightmare based upon mostly a child's point of view. That's what makes that film unforgettable. I'll never forget it. I will have no problem seeing it again, but just not right away, but soon, because some of the images still stick with me, you know. And when images stick with you, let them stick for a while, and then go back and see it again is kind of been my view on things. But at any rate, that's just the way I see it. Others can disagree, but yeah, cannibalism would be the one thing I can't really handle. Heavy, depressing films. Well, you know what? Come and see. I kind of, and I always quote Ebert because I agree with many things that he has said. Ebert once said, the most depressing thing you can see is a bad movie. If it's a great movie, it's not going to be depressing. It may still depress you, of course, but that's a good thing. Yes, there's a lot of crap going on in this world. We have Ukraine, we have war, Israel. It's just, not to mention this attempt on a presidential candidate's life. So there's a lot going on. But I wouldn't, you know, I'm certainly not going to say, yeah, but okay, so if you want to escape all that, go see Come and See. No, of course not. That's if you need to escape from the horrors of the world, you don't watch Come and See. But I think that sometimes film or books even, if not commentators, you know, or whatever the case may be, but in particular, mostly art, has its function in terms of articulating that horror in a way that can be poetic and beautiful. Come and See is very poetic and it's very beautiful. But a war, as some people have said, war is not pretty, but it could still look beautiful. And that's really the irony of that picture. So I'm still not going to convince Tim to see it, and that's okay. Hey, I totally understand. Like I said, I can't deal with watching grim, joyless type stuff every single day. That's for sure. I can't. I don't think most people can. But when something does come along that transcends the usual, that articulates something much deeper, then I think that is essential. But you see it when you're ready. It took me a long time to finally come around to see this movie. Not because I wasn't sure about it. I don't know. I wanted to be sure I was ready in terms of, I think, my age and experience, certainly not with warfare, but with understanding war in general and the perception of war before I could really see it. I wanted to be sure it didn't seem like some sort of somebody too inexperienced to really understand. If that makes any sense. Just I waited, and I'm glad I did. I saw it finally. So those are just my thoughts on that. This one was from 4 months ago, and it has to do with Lily Gladstone's Oscar loss. And I said, was this a political thing? Some of you know Emma Stone won for Poor Things, I think it's called. So she beat Lily Gladstone, who seemed to be a shoo-in. Now look, I don't really, you know, the Oscars are what they are. Either you agree with the Academy's assessment or you don't. I remember somebody once told me, you know, it's really just a pat in the back type thing. And you know what? I don't disagree. I think it is that. Actors vote for actors, directors vote for directors. So there can certainly be situations where jealousy and politics enters the picture. And in particular, politics. In particular, that. So, one viewer said her loss wasn't political. Her campaign was. And those in the Academy who actually hold the work as the most important factor didn't fall for it. And good for them. True equality is not giving everyone a trophy just because of representation or diversity, but because of quality. Well, yes, absolutely. But here's the kicker. In Killers of the Flower Moon, the story itself is political. The plight of Native Americans for eons now, years and years and years, ever since Plymouth Rock, has been political. No matter what, it is political. Now, that's not to say that you can tell a story about Native Americans without making it political, but in this case, it isn't so much the politics of it, it's the greed. That's the story of the movie. Killers of the Flower Moon sort of falls in line with Scorsese's Casino and Wolf of Wall Street in terms of greed. You could almost see those three as sort of a trilogy of its own, unofficial trilogy. That's really where it's at. Plus dealing with history in a way that is it's cumbersome and it gets under your skin, like Gangs of New York. Kind of shares a certain affinity with that. So, but the thing is that she is, first of all, she is Native American and playing a Native American. And this is a historical lesson that has been ignored for quite some time until the book really came out, which I have read. I think it's a fantastic book, and I've mentioned that before. But the book itself is political. I mean, how can it not be? It is. And the film, thus, is going to be political. So her campaign shouldn't be anything less. It's not that she's trying to run for office. She was just trying to address what was already self-evident in the film. And if that bothered people, because the symmetry was there, it's unavoidable. So she was also, I don't think she was even really pushing, I don't think she had an agenda beyond just discussing the politics of it and what had happened to Native Americans. And it's about time that a story about them, even if it's not completely told from their point of view, although parts of the film are, more so than the book. I mean, I don't care what people say. They haven't read the book then, if they think the book was more about Molly Burkhart than the film is. I've read this. It's not. The film is much more about Molly Burkhart than the book. The book also deals with the birth of the FBI and Edgar Hoover and all that kind of stuff. So, and keep in mind, this film was originally going to be the story of the investigation into these murders from the outside. And that would be white FBI men. Well, you can't help that. But instead, they took this love story between Ernest Burkhart and Molly Burkhart, right? A white guy with a Native American woman, and made that the focus. That was the story. So the investigation, which is still part of the film, was not central to the film, nor the story of the birth of the FBI. It was really this story that they brought to the surface. It's actually, in that sense, it's very different from, say, Thunderheart. Some of you have seen that with Val Kilmer, which is a pretty good FBI thriller. And that dealt with a incident at Oglala, which was a documentary that came out the year prior, produced by Robert Redford, I believe. And it's not a dissimilar story, but in this case, this is the discovery of oil. And all these Native Americans got access to the oil, became wealthy, but they could barely use their own money. They had their homes, but sure, they bought things, but they had to get permission. It's very political. How can it not be? So, yeah, I think she was just trying to say, look, I have a position here. I have to speak for them. How often does a Native American woman actually make it into the movies nowadays, directed by Martin Scorsese, and in a Martin Scorsese picture, and actually get to talk about her position about being Native American today, and also trying to, by the way, there's another film she's in. I don't think it got financing just yet. It's still hasn't gotten not financing. It didn't get distribution yet. She was promoting that as well, and also her role and the history of it, and how we can't ignore it. What do you expect her to do? Not talk about those things? Of course she's going to talk about them. Is it political? You bet your ass it is. Does it need to be talked about? Yes. We don't really talk enough about the plight of Native Americans, especially in this day and age. Why don't we talk about it? What's the problem? And the problem may be that they don't have enough of a voice out there, and they should. And she would be first and foremost in line to really provide that voice, so why not do it? It's self-evident. It's part of the film, too. It's history. So, I just disagree with that completely. Anyway, this one was about Evil Dead 2 back on VHS, which is true. And in fact, they also put Terrifier 2 on VHS. Okay. So, apparently, somebody did say something. This was a while ago. This was 6 months ago. I'm sorry, I didn't get to these right away. So much has been going on. But let's see. Somebody called the Night Camera said, so horror, especially lower budget horror, often works much better on VHS. VHS does a really good job of hiding all the stuff you are not supposed to see, whereas DVD and Blu-rays have a tendency to show everything. Okay, that's true. Take A Nightmare on Elm Street, for example. If you have a VHS copy, or even the original DVD transfer, which I do have, which was slightly sharper than VHS, but not really any cleaner. Okay? It's still super creepy. If you watch a later release, you can see all the practical effects that you weren't supposed to, like the holes in the stairs that Nancy gets stuck in, or Event Horizon. I saw that on VHS and it was creepy as hell. But watching it again later on streaming, being able to see every single detail really took away from the atmosphere. It made it almost goofy. Well, you know what? There's also in The Exorcist, from the original DVD release. Now, granted, I knew about it because I looked for it, based on the making of The Exorcist, which was a DVD extra. 25 years in the making, so that was back in 1998. And they mentioned how the guy who did the stunt where he falls down the Exorcist stairs, originally I think they were called the Hitchcock stairs, he fell down twice, the stunt. And, so they lined every step with black or some sort of rubber. And if you watched the scene, you could sort of see it if you look at it closely. Of course, it's cut from a couple of different angles, so you have to look real fast or put it in slow motion. And that was just a DVD transfer. But VHS overall, the problem I've always had with VHS is that you weren't really seeing the whole picture. That was really my issue with VHS. I don't know what they're doing with these VHS tapes now. I think they're digital VHS, so it means you got to buy a digital VHS player, I would imagine. And VHS quality was never really that good anyway. So I disagree. I don't think that, if you watch a movie in the theater, it's as clear print as you can imagine, even way back. So depending on how the lamps were set up for the screen, either you saw detail or you did not. But some people were able to put up with much if they found the film entertaining. I like seeing detail. My only problem is that today it's just, we have 4K Blu-ray discs. I don't really understand the purpose behind all that. But I don't know. think there was also some issue with the Universal horror films, from what I understand. The ones with Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff, and particularly for the Blu-rays. You could see in the background the foggy landscape of the cemetery, those basic traditional shots that you would always have in those films. They always had a painted background, and now it became even more clear that it was a painted backdrop. But that doesn't always bother me. The mood is still there. It's still, the atmosphere's there. So I'm not bothered by that. So, but Tim Dougherty had said something once again 6 months ago. It's VHS is such a weird artifact to gravitate to. This has to be a gimmicky novelty gift thing. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's the purpose behind it. I just don't understand why you need to start manufacturing movies that way when you got, so much better now. I mean, in terms of technology and everything else. So, all right. Anyway, those are the comments I'll deal with for now. On occasion, I'll talk about whoever leaves me a comment. Mention it and discuss it. Why not? So, those are my thoughts. Tell me yours. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe to my channel. I review movies quite frequently and talk about film topics of all sorts. And if you are a subscriber, please hit that notification bell for future uploads. And this is Jerry Saravia at the Movies, signing off.